Welcome to Grace for the Tryhard, a place where we tryhards can be reminded of the grace we've been given and be empowered to walk in it every day. Do you ever feel like no matter how hard you try, you aren't good enough? Have you struggled with shame and want to experience more freedom in your walk with Christ? Do you feel inspired and empowered when you hear other people's stories of transformation and healing? If your answer is yes to any of those questions, I'm right there with you. Being empowered to live and work out of grace is possible, and here we are learning how to do that together. No need to show up polished, poised, or perfect. Come as you are and join us as we experience God's grace together. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Grace for the Tryhard, a place where tryhards can learn to receive God's grace and live freely out of it. I'm Lindsay, the host of this podcast, and I'm really glad you're listening. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I really hope it encourages you, it speaks to you, it challenges you, it helps you to see God's grace more clearly. Today, we have an awesome interview with one of my closest friends. Her name is Jessica Holcomb, and Jessica has lived with me, she's cried with me, she's prayed with me, and she constantly helps me to see Jesus more clearly and has just been a really, really great friend to me. We went to college together, we worked in a campus ministry together, and now I'm working in another organization. So this season has been hard for me because I don't see Jess as much as I used to, because I used to see her like every day because we work together. But the moments that we do get to see each other and hang out and talk are just so refreshing, and I wanted to share a little conversation that we've had with all of you. Jess and I had very different upbringings when it comes to just how we experienced God as a child, and I learned through this interview that it makes a lot more sense to me now why in our friendship it always seemed like Jess just more easily understood grace and like believed the grace that God had for her versus me for myself. We talk about our friendship, we talk about boundaries, we talk about perfectionism, we talk about Sabbath, we even talk about baking. So we talked about a lot of different things. We kind of had just a very organic conversation and just kind of let the conversation go in whatever direction it felt like it was going, which is what I love to do. So there isn't just one topic that we focus on. We kind of talk about a lot of different things, but I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's get into the interview. Hello, everyone. We're here today for another episode of Grace for the Tryhard. And we're going to be talking with one of my dearest friends, Jessica Holcomb. Let's give her a round of applause.
Wow.
Just kidding, it's just me here. But I hope you are giving her a round of applause wherever you're listening to this. We're going to have a great conversation today. There's not a huge plan, so we're just going to kind of see how it goes.
Grace.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about how I'm going to introduce you. So I'm going to just do it on the fly.
Okay.
So I don't want to tell your whole story, but basically we've been friends for, I mean, we met in like 2014, 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably 2015.
2015,
yeah.
And it's 2023 now.
Mm-hmm.
So like 8-ish years.
Yeah.
It also feels like we've been friends since we were like 2. At least for me, like, yeah. I feel like I've known you forever, so yeah. 8 years feels like a long time, but also not a long time. So yeah, wow. We've been through a lot, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and just like the strong friendship that we've built. But if you just want to share a little bit about yourself.
Okay, yeah, so we met through Chi Alpha, the Christian student organization that we were both a part of as students, and then both worked for, and I still work for, and yeah, it's just crazy you saying that, like 8 years, because that is like my entire adult life. That's like the me who I slowly have like become now, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. Like you've known the me that I've more intentionally been.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And we've like grown together in that, in both becoming that. So, but yeah, we both went to IU, and I don't know what else to say about me. I'm married. 2 years ago, 2 and a few months, 2.5, yeah. And I'm from Northwest Indiana, the region, for any of those who know what that is. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Cool. That's great. And I really love that you said, like, for most of your, like, adult life, because I didn't put that together, but we're both 27 and 8 years, so we were, like, 19 when we met.
Yeah. And
for me, the 20s have been, like, probably the hardest decade of my life. Going on a decade, I guess. And I didn't expect that at all. Like, I just thought it was just gonna be fun. Like, you're over 21, so you can, like, drink, and, you know, you're just getting a new job, you're in college, after college, and all this stuff.
Everything's so exciting.
Yeah, but for me, it's been just, like, a lot of personal growth, like you're saying, like, the person who we're becoming. Like, I guess you could spend your 20s just having a good time, but there's just a lot of, like, leaving childhood that you're like, okay, now I have to deal with, like, I don't have to, but I can deal with how I grew up and my fears and insecurities, and, like, now I'm going to be on my own, so how do I want to live my life? And so it's been really cool that you've been with me through a lot of that, through, like, all of it. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up and, like, made that connection. So I want to talk a little bit about friendship. Before I came to college, I didn't have a ton of girlfriends. I was more of, like, a guy's girl, and my mom isn't super girly, so, like, my example of a woman was more strong and, like, independent and all this stuff, and I had a ton of guy cousins, and I just felt more comfortable with guys being friends. And when I came to college, I kind of just expected that would be my reality, and then we met and we got really close. We led a small group together, and I feel like that's when we really, really got close. Got to know each other a lot more, and so, like, you helped me a lot to, I don't know, just believe that I could have girlfriends.
Same. Like, I mean, I don't think maybe I wasn't the exact same, but I definitely didn't have any close girlfriends at that time. Well, not any, but who were, like, really close, I guess. I don't know. Just, like, in my day-to-day life, kind of, who were Christians, specifically, who I could, like, just talk to about the deepest things in life, you know, and the things that mattered the most and that were happening, the changes and transformation we were both experiencing. I hadn't really had that. I remember, actually, like, there was one point where I, like, prayed and asked God, like, please give me, like, a girl best friend. Because I just didn't feel like I'd ever really had that. Yeah. Like, a close friend, you know, who I, like, we shared our hearts with each other. Because I had close friends and we were similar, or had similar interests and likes, or we were just really different and whatever. But yeah, so I agree. He definitely gave me that.
Yeah. It's really nice to remember. Yeah. Because I don't think about this all the time, you know? But yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, I guess, just, like, through the season of becoming friends with you and becoming a believer, starting to follow Jesus, like, I definitely 100% agree that, like, that was one thing that really brought us together. Because we were, like, getting into the Word, talking about it all the time. We had this passion for international students and, like, wanting to love them and make them feel welcomed at IU, and also just, like, learning how God speaks, you know. At least for me, I didn't grow up thinking he spoke. I just thought he was kind of chilling up in heaven or whatever. But I think and maybe you can share a little bit about just like your upbringing in church and stuff, and just like your perspective of God then versus your perspective of God now / like in college. Was there a difference?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I don't know if I don't know if it was like as clear of like I thought this and now I thought that and now I think this.
Yeah.
I think there were just a lot of like missing pieces. I don't think that there were definitely things I thought about God that were wrong, but they were more like subtle and just things that I kind of put on him, just in my humanity. But there were just a lot of missing pieces and a lot of things that I thought about God, but I didn't know why.
Yeah.
And I had never really, at least not what I remember, been taught, like, in Scripture. Like, how do I know that this is who God is? I mean, I think I had experienced a lot of his, like, him being a God who provides. And thankfully, like, I did grow up in a church that was very experiential.
Yeah.
It was, like, charismatic, Pentecostal, so, like, I'm thankful for that, because I knew God more relationally, but, yeah, like, through Chi Alpha, I just learned how to, like, know who God is more myself.
Yeah.
And, like, in Scripture and theologically, and, like, how to actually pursue him.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, like, one thing I struggled with before, like, encountering Jesus was, like, reading or hearing the word from, like, when I went to church and stuff, but then, like, not thinking it was, like, just possible to live it out. I just thought that's way too hard, and so why even try? Did you ever think that? Or did you think it was, like, yes, this is possible and I can live this out?
I don't know if I ever... Well, okay, I did have that thought. I remember, like, when I was little.
Okay.
Like, probably, like, 10. I remember, like, I don't think it was from reading Scripture. I just, like, knew God was holy. I knew God didn't sin. Whether that was something, I learned from church or my mom or something.
Yeah.
But, like, I knew God was holy, and I knew that I was sinful. Like, I felt my sin. And I remember one day saying to my mom, like, I just wish I could just be holy. I just wish I could just,
my gosh,
not ever have to worry about sin. I just want it to be gone. So I guess in that way, yeah. And I was saying that knowing that, like, I did sin,
Yeah.
and that, like, I couldn't be perfect like God, I guess. But after that, I don't know how much I really thought about that.
Yeah.
I think you described specifically reading the Bible, and I don't really know. I remember I tried to read the Bible once for like a week, and then I was like, well, I can't do this. Like, I think I enjoyed it, but it was just like, I was like in over my head. So I don't know if I really ever had that experience from reading it myself. Like, my experiences with God, or like my understanding of him, was probably more from like worship and just like church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And I think for me, like, I didn't really read the Bible as a kid either. But just going to church and going to mass, like,
yeah,
I would hear it. And again, like, no one ever, like, read through the whole thing to me, so I don't think I got, like, an accurate picture. It was just, like, stories, And so I think I filled in the blanks a lot.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you also, even though at a young age you, like, understood your sin and, like, God is holy and all this stuff, but, like, I think, too, because you were experiencing God a lot through worship and, like, through relationship, it wasn't as hard for you to, like, believe grace.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true?
Yeah.
Okay. And for me, like, grace wasn't even a thing, so of course I can't be perfect or be holy, because there's no, way out. Or someone's not gonna, like, do this for me on my behalf.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Just, like, if anything, my church talked about grace a lot.
Okay.
And I literally remember one service in Chi Alpha when I first started coming, after I was kind of running away from God for a while. our pastor said literally the most, like, basic, simple thing. He was like, you know, just because you believe in God doesn't make you a Christian. And I literally remember, like, sitting there being like, oh my gosh, he's right. I'm sure he didn't think about that very long. It's just like a basic, you know, like, simple thing. But I was like, I needed to hear that at that time. I just was, like, making a lot of compromises in my faith and just, like, forgetting things I knew because it was like, well, God loves me, you know? And so it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is all making so much sense to me now. Because
Really?
I've always seen you as, like, someone, who just, like, gets grace. And again, we don't all, like, fully understand grace, but it just seems like it's easier to believe for you. And a lot of that is probably just because of your upbringing and, like, you were taught that truth over and over and over again. So it's, like, it's easier to believe. And two, like, I remember one time I talked to you about, like, I don't really ever, like, just feel like God loves me. Like, I don't just sit and just think, like, oh, God loves me so much. Like, that's just not natural for me. And and I said something like, do you ever feel that way? And you're like, no, I usually do. Like, I usually just feel like God loves me. And I'm like, that sounds amazing, you know? So I just, like, I think that's so cool. And it just makes me think about, like, if and when I have kids, like, I want to just saturate them, like, in grace. And I understand, too, like, you can go too far. Like you're saying, like, you need both. You need, like, that grace should motivate you to, like, want to just surrender your life to Jesus and, like, surrender your will to him. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely very thankful. Like, I don't know how much I'd say that I grew up in, like, a Christian household. But we went to church, and I'm really thankful for that because, like, that's how I knew God was loving and good. And I, like, loved being in his presence because of that. Oh, so cool. Well, I didn't expect to talk about this, but this was so good. Okay, we have switched locations, so it might sound a little different, but, you know, food was being made, and so we didn't want you to hear Sager cooking. Right. Because he can be pretty obnoxious in the kitchen, right?
Oh, man, you know him.
Banging pots and stuff. Okay, so we talked a little bit about friendship, and then we just kind of talked about God, and you know, that's grace and stuff. So is there any other just, like, memory from our friendship you want to share? I know there's been a lot. We lived together for a year, and for me that was, like, a really good experience, just because we spent so much time together, and that was a hard year for me, and just having you with me through it was, like, awesome. And we were also dating for the first time in a while, I think. Like, you started dating Sager, and I started dating Joe, and that was just cool to, like, process that together.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, oh gosh, just, like, a memory. Yeah, like you said, there's so many. I guess just because we've been talking about, like, the beginning of our friendship more, like, something I guess isn't really a memory. There's multiple memories, I guess, but of just, like, when I was first getting to know you, before we became, like, really close even, but also then too, is just, like, how vulnerable you are. Like, I truly think that is why we became such good friends, because you just struck me as, like, the most vulnerable person I've ever met. And, like, intentionally. Like, part of it was I know you were intentional, but also you were like, I just can't keep this in. Like, I just have to, like, confess this thing or just be honest with you. And it was so refreshing. I had never met anybody like that. And it just, like, changed me. Like, it changed my perspective totally on friendship. And I was like, wow, this girl, like, really loves Jesus because she's not, like, faking it at all. You know, she's just being real. And like I said, it was just so refreshing, and I think that really, like, set the foundation for our friendship. So I'm just really thankful for that.
Yeah.
About you?
I definitely agree. Thanks for saying that. I agree that was the foundation of our friendship.
Yeah.
And would also help to make it so strong.
Mm-hmm.
And if any of you who are listening struggle with friendships, because I struggled with friendships most of my life. Like, I had one really good friend in high school, but before that, like, I just felt like I never had friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and a lot of that was because I never felt like I could be myself around someone. And the more I learned, well, obviously just being in a Christian community and, like, being with people who are pursuing Jesus, it's, like, feels safer because you're all, like, family.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so there's a lot to that, but I'm just thankful that you always just, like, accepted that vulnerability, because people can take vulnerability and use it against you, you know? And I must have sensed something in you that was like, this girl's not going to use it against me. So
yeah.
I'd also just like to talk about something a guy at work mentioned today, and that's focusing on progress over perfection. From my perspective, I feel like you are excellent at things, but to me, you've never seemed like a perfectionist. Like, but I just want to know, like, how do you see yourself, and are there areas of your life that you feel like you're a perfectionist?
Yeah, there are areas of my life where I see myself as a perfectionist. I don't see myself as that overall, but there's definitely areas where I'm like, wow, it comes out. And I think, it comes out, like, in my home and, like, how clean it is, and, like, organization and things, like, everything has a place and it should be there. And, like, organizing my life, or just, like, tasks and to-do lists, stuff like that, I can be perfectionist about. But I definitely, thankfully, like, that's something that Jesus has been and is still, like, working on in me, and has just, like, made me more aware of my tendencies, my perfectionistic tendencies, and showing me that it's, like, connected to control. And just, like, he's been helping me to grow and, like, releasing some of those things to him. Yeah. And just accepting that it can't be perfect, it won't be, and perfect isn't even the best thing for me. Yeah. So, or my idea of what perfect is.
Oh, that's so good. So, I think in our culture, I think people are learning that, like, it's good to let go, but I think we're all kind of, like, want to be in control. Maybe it's just human nature. Yeah. But, like, why do you think it's okay for us to let go? Like, why should we let go of that control? Especially when it comes to, like, things like your house. Like, I think in our heads we could think, there's nothing wrong with wanting my house to be clean, you know? Yeah. But you're, like, sensing there's some, like, need for control in it. Yeah. So why is that good to let go, and why is it, like, okay to let go?
Right. Like, I don't want my house to be a pigsty, you know? And I think that sometimes maybe the temptation is to think in extremes, at least for me. Is like, oh my gosh, if I don't clean it, it's so dirty. And, like, it just becomes this bigger thing in my head, too. And it just, like, bothers me. And when it bothers me that much, then that's, like, a signal of something deeper, you know? It's not just about cleaning my house. Like, yes, like you said, we can all agree it's a good thing to clean your house. Yeah. But it's, like, pointing to a deeper desire in me to control my life. Yeah. And it's just, like, a false sense of security. Yeah. So it's so it's good for me to release that to God, because then when I do that, it's putting me more in line with reality. That, like, yes, there's certain things I can do in my life. It doesn't mean that I just have, like, no control over anything. But like Paul says, like, I've learned to be content in all circumstances. You know, I've learned to be content when I'm hungry and when I have plenty, and all that. Yep. So, like, I think that when I practice releasing that to God and trusting him with it, I'm practicing contentment and being content in Jesus. I'm practicing, like, believing and trusting that my value doesn't change when my life is a mess or in my mess, in my messiness. In my heart, in my spiritual journey, and physically. Like, having a physically clean home isn't bad, but yeah, sometimes it can be a picture of what I'm okay with, even, like, in my heart, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's why it's good. And why is it okay?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I guess it's kind of a similar answer, but also just because, like, God loves me in my mess, too. And if I don't clean it, you know, for 2 days, it's going to be okay, actually.
Wow.
Like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be okay. The world's going to keep moving, and I can find peace even in a messy house.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. I needed to hear that because I've just been super busy at work, and every day I just feel like I come home and I'm like, I didn't, like, finish things, or I'm not ahead, you know, and I think God's also showing me a similar thing of, like, wanting to find control in that, and trusting, like, if I don't get everything done, I'm still just as loved, and my identity is secure, so I can, like, be okay. I had another question. So with practicing this letting go, have you seen any, like, positive fruit come out of that, like, in you or in your relationships or just anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think practically just, like, instead of maybe when I'm tired, instead of choosing to clean my house because it just bothers me and I'm just like, oh, I'll just feel better after I do it, I actually just, like, have time to rest instead, you know, or time to be with God or be with Sager, you know. So just practically, like, instead of just prioritizing the things that actually matter the most to me, you know, letting my schedule and my actions reflect my values more.
Yeah.
It frees me up to do that.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I get to it whenever I get to it. And then just, like, just trusting God more, just growing and trusting Him. And I don't always do it, you know, I don't always relent that. Sometimes I'm like, I just gotta clean it, you know, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's okay. Like, it's good that I cleaned it, and sometimes I'm like, wow, that actually didn't make me feel better.
Yeah.
So it's kind of revealing that, but
we all have different areas, you know.
Like, yeah.
For me, that's interesting.
That's the radiator. I'm sorry. It is pretty noisy. It can be, but it has been quiet so far. So,
guys, if you hear a radiator, don't worry about it. We're okay. We're staying warm.
Yeah.
So, I kind of lost my train of thought, but
we all have areas.
Yeah, we all have areas. Yeah. So, like, for me, even though when my house gets, like, I haven't taken care of it in a while, and my while is probably different than your while, but, like, I feel it. I'm like, okay, I need to clean, but that's definitely not, like, a temptation or as much. Yeah. But I have other areas where I'm like, just put, and again, like, it just sounds like to me it's a lot of just like, where's your mind going? Like, how much energy are you giving to this thing? And when you can't do it, or you can't do it a certain way, or you can't get something, how much is that affecting your mental state? You know? I think that's one way to, like, tell when something is, like, you're thinking about it too much and it has a hold on you versus something that doesn't.
Yeah.
Because it's all, like, internal, and I think for some people they're just maybe not as in tune with that as you've learned to be. So I just want to help people have some practical, like, tips of, like, okay, yeah, this is affecting me and I need to release this to God, versus actually, that didn't really bother me, I'm okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of rest, because you're talking about how, like, when you, like, specifically with cleaning and stuff, you release that and you have more time to do other things that you value, like resting. I want to talk a little bit about that because I know you've been just like learning about Sabbath, and we've all been, I feel like both of us have been learning about Sabbath the past few years. Just want to do a quick shout out to the Bema podcast. For anyone who wants to learn about Sabbath, go listen to, I don't know what episode it is, but it's like 1 through 3 or something.
Definitely the episode 1. Yeah, creation story specifically.
It'll rock your world, and like as Americans, I think Sabbath, when I say Sabbath, I mean just like a day of rest or resting. Like that just doesn't make sense to us because we're so like productivity minded. So like if you listen to that and understand the culture, like it's just gonna blow your mind. I suggest you listen to it twice and like sit and like take notes. And you'll get a lot out of it. So
and then also read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer and listen to his podcasts as well. Because there's a lot of great resources on
I'll link it all so people can just click and go.
Nice.
But yeah, so do you want to kind of just share what you've been learning, and either like right now or in the past few years when it comes to Sabbath?
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I'll just like go off of what I was kind of already talking about a bit, because it does connect. Like learning about Sabbath has trickled into the rest of my life, and I think that is the purpose of Sabbath. It's this one day a week that we get to rest with God. And like God, when he created the whole world and humanity, he took the 7th day to just rest and enjoy what he had done, the work that he had created. And he didn't need to rest, but he did that as an example for us to show us, like this is something we've learned from the Bema podcast, like to show us that like perfect, I think it's that like perfect wasn't really like an idea for like ancient Jewish people because of that. It was more just like God showing us that it was good, right? Because he kept saying this is good. It is very good. He didn't say it is perfect. He said it's good. And then that there is a point, that there is a point at which if you keep adding on to it, it's not good anymore. And we just think more is better. And like more work, just keep working. And so God didn't need to rest, but he made it a point to show us that it is good for us to rest from our work and to just enjoy it. So that's like kind of connected to like the fact that we have limitations, you know? We have a certain capacity, and we want to think that we don't. We want to think that, oh, like nobody can limit me, nothing can limit me, you know? But it's just not true. Like, we think that freedom is found in, you know, not being limited by anything, but we actually find freedom within our limitations. Like, David says, like, Lord, your boundary lines fall in a pleasant place for me. Like, we find our freedom in that because those limits are there for our good. Each week that we practice Sabbath, we are like aligning ourselves with that reality and choosing. I mean, you may not always think about that, but I'm trying to at least like intentionally think about that. There is this poetry book by Wendell Berry. He's an old farmer pastor guy or something. And which is kind of random, but he has this book called Sabbath Poems or Poems for Sabbath or something. And I rented it from the library, and I would start reading those poems on my Sabbath. And it helped me so much to like just, I don't know, get this idea more into my heart and like see it as a good thing, see it as something to enjoy, but this idea of trusting God with my unfinished tasks. Like, there were a few of the poems that just struck me where he said that, like, thank you, God, for this day that I get to enjoy with you in the midst of all of my unfinished tasks. I left them unfinished, and they will be in the same spot waiting for me when I come back tomorrow. And just like, you know, just kind of taking a breath and being okay with that rather than, I mean, I think that that's a really hard thing for Sabbath, especially when you first start, but even now, after I've been practicing it for like 5 years, like, just like, oh no, I didn't finish this thing. Gosh darn it, now I can't enjoy this whole day because it's going to be bothering me, you know? Rather than that, yeah, like just taking that as an invitation to like just trust God with that unfinished thing.
Yeah. So that kind of reminds me of, with it being there where you left it.
Yeah.
For me, sometimes I get into a, I don't know if it's like a poverty abundance mentality, but it's like a scarcity mentality, or like, and with a Sabbath, it's like time, like my time is running out, and I have to enjoy every moment and do everything before I die.
Oh, okay. Okay, before you die. Okay.
That's too much. But like, I think that's where my addiction to busy and like production comes from sometimes, because I don't believe like it'll be there when I come back.
Yeah.
I don't know if that totally makes sense, but like, just, I think my mindset's just been shifting a little bit about like eternity. Like, we have eternity to do things. Yeah. So like, I don't have to be afraid that I'm not going to get everything done in my life. Yeah. Because we have eternity to get everything done. Yeah. And there's always going to be more to get done. So just like, enjoy the Sabbath, because it's, if anything, it's like a release of like, there's always going to be more to get done. So just enjoy this day. Yeah. Where you don't have to do anything, and you're not supposed to do anything. Right. So I don't know why this has been in my head, but it has been.
No, you're right. That is so freeing. Yeah, I think that's something I haven't thought about in a while, but something I used to think about. Like, my dream used to be on Broadway and to do musicals, and I still really love that stuff. I haven't done it in like 8 years though, and I remember like feeling like God was asking me to give that up in order to like disciple people. And now that's what I'm doing with my life. And there are times when I'm like, God, like, will there ever be a time in my life where I'll be able to do that thing? Like, I really miss it. Yeah. And I really loved it. Like, it brought me a lot of joy, and I know it's not a bad thing to enjoy. But, like, that exact thing has, like, brought me a lot of comfort of knowing that, like, God didn't just create us in the garden to just be with him. He created us to rule alongside him. And so that's what it's going to be like with him at the end of all things, you know? Like, we're not just going to be in this weird ethereal state, just, like, worshiping him the whole time. We'll be worshiping him in everything that we do. Yes. And we're going to be doing all the things, you know? Like, and so I don't know if there will be an opportunity for me to do that in this life, but I know that if not, like, God knows that's something I enjoy, and I think there'll be space. There'll be plenty of time. We are not short on time, actually. Yeah. And actually, as you were saying that, like, okay, so because of that, I can rest this one day. But there's also a statistic I've heard, and I can't quote the source or anything, but John Mark Comer said it, that, like, there was some study done on people who did a Sabbath or even just rested one day a week or something, whether it was Christian or not, and that those people lived on average 7 years longer than anybody else. Yeah. Probably because they live a much more peaceful, content, joyful, present life. Yep. So if you're worried about having enough life to live, then Sabbath, because you'll actually live longer. Yeah. Yeah, on Earth, so that's right. So cool. Yeah. Another thing too with that, this is kind of off topic, but similar with the whole like Broadway thing. So like, let's say you never get on Broadway on this earth, but then we're in eternity in heaven, in the new kingdom, and you know, it's tons of space, tons of people, tons of things to do. I think at least for me, because I can get really competitive sometimes, and like think like, you know, there's only going to be one Sandy in Greece. Yeah. So in heaven, like,
you have to be the best Sandy if you're going to be Sandy in Grease. But actually, there'll be, like, tons of musicals going on. Like, infinite musicals, infinite space for those. So there's room for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful, I think, for people who are tryhards because, at least for me, that was, like, my thing with volleyball and stuff. Like, I was a setter, and I never got to play because I wasn't as good as the other girl. And so that, like, caused a lot of not good things inside of me of, like, disliking her and feeling bad self-worth and all this stuff. And so,
like, if I'm not the best, then I'm not useful or something. Like,
and I don't get to do what I love.
Right.
Because you want to be on stage. You want to be singing and dancing and stuff. So.
And that's frustrating. And Yeah.
So that's cool. And just something I need to remind myself all the time because that's so easy to lose that mindset. And it just helps you have a lot more joy and make a lot more friends. Because you think there's room for everyone. I don't have to compete. And that's another thing with, like, the girlfriends thing. Like, I didn't have a ton of girlfriends because I felt, like, jealous of them sometimes or, like, compared myself to them or whatever. And so once I've, like, let go of that mentality of, like, there's room for everyone and we all have beautiful, distinct, different characteristics and personalities and that's all good. You know, we're not supposed to be carbon copies of each other.
That's, like, really...
No, it's okay. There's the thing again. What's it called?
Radiator.
The radiator.
Yeah. It likes to sing random times.
It wants its shot too on Broadway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess just, like, that is interesting to me, like, hearing that perspective too, because I never did competitive sports. The only sports I did were gymnastics, and I did, like, a little bit of dancing. I did track, so track was a little bit competitive, but it was still, like, I did, like, relays, so it was, like, a team thing, or we were all doing the exact same thing, basically, and, like, gymnastics was, like, competitive, but against myself. So, like, I, like, in college, I've, like, tried to push myself out of my comfort zone and play soccer or basketball, which is really out of my comfort zone. But, like, I think it's really out of my comfort zone because people get competitive, and I'm just like, I don't get it. Why are you competitive? Why does it have to be this way? But even just you sharing that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I
was talking to someone at work. Okay, so there's a guy I work with, and he was a college basketball player. We were talking a little bit about just, like, being a college athlete and kind of talking about that, too. I completely just lost my train of thought. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. So I told him, like, I kind of, like, turn off that mindset when I play sports now, or sometimes I just can't play sports because I know there's going to, like, be something, like, turned on in me of, like, I hate that person because they're beating me or they're being... And it's another thing for if someone's just, like, good at the sport, I can deal with that, but when they're, like, playing dirty... It just, I lose it inside, you know? And no one can see it, but for me, it's, like, it feels like this isn't good. So, and he was telling me, he's like, you know, not all competitiveness is bad. Like, like, yes, you have to check yourself and stuff, but, like, and I'm still learning about how that can be good because I've always kind of thought of it as, like, a bad thing. So I probably just need to talk to more athletes who love Jesus and see how, they, like, look at it. There was another thing you were talking about. You just said so many great things in the whole, like, talking about Sabbath and stuff, but you were talking about limits. Which I think is also a huge thing for tryhards to accept. At least for me, that's been a journey this past, like, 2-ish years of, like, first off, recognizing I have limits. I don't know why, but I didn't really know that word most of my life. I always just thought, push past those, you know, like, limits don't exist. They do. Like, we have skin on our body. We can't just be, like, everywhere, you know? We can't be, like, a cat where we just, like, morph into other things. Like, okay, that sounds weird. But, like, they're a lot more like jelly, and we have, like, bones and structure and so like. Anyway, that's from, like, the Boundaries book. Of just, like, why did God give us skin? Because we're separate from other people. Like, He didn't want us all just to be, like, meshed together into, like, a blob. So, like, that's helping me to understand, like, with my body, like, there's limits there. But I kind of wanted to talk about boundaries, too, because I know you. I don't know, did you just finish the book, or you're still reading it?
I'm still reading it. Slowly.
But we've talked about it a decent amount the past, like, years. So, I don't know. I just forgot that boundaries connect to Sabbath, And I think that tryhards, we tend to, like I said, push ourselves past those limits, and there's to some degree that's a good thing, you know, because we can't, like, God does want us to grow.
Right.
But I think there's a way of growing and just surrendering and trusting him through the growth process, and like trying to run faster than him, you know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I must say I am very slowly reading through that book. But
do you want to say what chapter you're on?
I don't even remember. Like maybe 5 or something.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
It's not like you just read one chapter, so
yeah.
You're in the book.
Yeah, I'm in it. I'm in it, yeah. I mean, honestly, that example that you used has been very, like, yeah, like, when you say it at first, you're like, well, yeah, duh, we have skin on us, but it's like, I had never thought about that before as an example of, like...
Me neither.
And just, like, the idea it's talked about of, like, God has boundaries. I was like, wait, what? Like,
yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, we don't think he does, because he loves us even though we're sinners, and he died for us, and he let himself be crucified, but at the same time, he still has a boundary of, like, if you don't put your faith and hope in him, you're not going to experience the fullness of life.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So, like, that is still a boundary that he has.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, just like that idea of God having boundaries, but also, like, Jesus, yes, he went to the cross, but at the same time, like, he was very honest.
Yes.
Like, yeah. I guess that's the thing with boundaries a lot of times, especially, like, for me with my family, like, really struggling to be honest about things that are really hard.
Yeah.
And feeling like, is that selfish, or is that wrong, or should I, as a Christian, like, just absorb the wound? And I think, yes, there is some of that in forgiveness, but that doesn't mean that you just don't do anything then. Yeah. It's like, yes, you do absorb the wound in forgiveness, but that doesn't mean that, like it actually is loving to be honest with them.
Yeah.
And, like, Jesus did that.
Right.
So that has just helped motivate me and show me that that's, like, the right thing to do. I don't know how connected this is to, like, I guess it is, I mean, yeah, it's connected to, like, accepting our limits, of that, like, in me accepting my limits, I have to hold other people to accepting my limits too, and I shouldn't expect them to know what my limits are. It is up to me to communicate that to them and make it clear to them.
Yeah.
And in me doing that, I'm also giving them the freedom to do that back as well. And I just think that so many of us don't think that we have the freedom to do that, or the autonomy, the authority to do that. But, like, God has given us that authority.
Yeah.
And that is love.
Yep. Oh, there's so much there, and, like, what you're saying too about Jesus, with the absorbing the wound. And I think it's healthy to, when someone hurts us, if we don't tell them, they're going to keep doing it, and we're basically enabling their sin in a way. So we don't set a boundary of distance, of, you know, like, telling them, like, hey, if you treat me this way, I'm not going to interact with you, I'm not going to whatever, like, and again, that's hard for some people to think that's loving, but it is actually loving, because
it's really hard.
You're not, like, letting them live in sin and live in death, you know?
Yeah.
So,
right.
That's one thing that's helped me a lot, because I also thought the same thing of, like, you know, Jesus just, like, took it all and went to the cross and just let everyone, like, mock him and all this stuff. But one thing we talked about, like, a year ago, because it's almost Easter again, about, like, my little thing where I realized that, like, Jesus chose to go to the cross. Yeah. And, like, he didn't begrudgingly go to the cross. He didn't, like, he wasn't a victim, you know, to everyone else's things. Like, he had boundaries, and, like, I'm not doing this because I feel forced to. Like, I am doing this because I want to. Yeah. And because I want to obey the Father. And so then we can look at that example and be like, okay, so now when someone hurts me, I don't have to feel like a victim, like, oh, I can't do anything about this. Like, no, you can do something. Yeah. You can tell them the truth. You can pray about it. You can forgive them. You can set a physical or emotional boundary. Yeah. And, of course, you want to reconcile the relationship, but sometimes if that person isn't going to receive that boundary or, accept it, then that's their choice.
Right.
That's another beautiful thing about boundaries. It's all about choice.
Yeah.
There's no forcing, in the beginning of creation, like, God didn't force Adam and Eve to do anything. He said, you have all the garden to choose from, and don't pick this fruit. And he could have just not given the option to choose it, but he allowed them in his will, which is still, like, crazy to us because we're like, why would you do that? But he thought that was good.
Right.
And then there was a consequence to what they did. And what's beautiful about that, too, is that consequence, God still comes in and is like, I want to make a way for you out. Like,
still giving them a choice.
To turn towards him. Like, we could talk so much about this, and maybe we should another time. But I think it's just really amazing, and I say it all not being like I do this perfectly, because I don't. It's still really hard for me. So the more I can talk about it, the more I'm more likely to actually live it out, because I see how good and valuable it is.
Definitely. I was just talking about this with another friend too, actually, of because we were talking about boundaries in the context of conflict, but even when there isn't conflict, of just like having that it's actually more loving to be honest about your boundaries of like, hey, I don't think I should hang out tonight. Instead of like, for me, instead of feeling like I have to have an excuse, I have to have like a good enough reason. Like, I feel that a lot.
Yes, me too.
It's, like, I'm trying to grow and just saying, I'm just tired and I just need to rest tonight. Yeah. And I do feel like we are practicing that with each other.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Even on Sunday, when you were like, you want to hang out? And I was like, I have a busy weekend and I think I'm going to be too tired and want to be alone. Yeah. And I'm thankful that we have that friendship, that we're learning this together.
Right, exactly. Where I'm like, I don't want you to hang out with me if you feel like you have to, or if you're just going to be like exhausted the whole time,
Even though I love hanging out with you. Yeah. And if I just never listen to my body or my limits, I would just not force myself, but I would do it. Yeah. But then I probably would like feel worse afterwards.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, it's not like there's never any time for that. That's why we listen to the Holy Spirit, you know? And if we feel like God's saying, just spend time with them, it's like, okay, then I can trust God that you'll give me the energy I need, you know? But I just feel like, especially for women, for Christian women, we've just been told to never listen to our body. Just always serve, always be selfless. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important for us to learn about this stuff.
So the last thing I just want to talk about is baking. Because I know it's been something, and we talked a little bit about Sabbath, and we didn't get to it, but we could probably do another podcast another time of just like what you like to do on Sabbath, because at least for me, it's like, okay, do I just sit and do nothing for a whole day? Like, there's things that are work in our mind, and then there's things that are like fun, and like you could still do something, but it's like, it's kind of like a mental thing of like, and you have to always check yourself, because even something that's fun for you could be tiring. Exactly. So, but I know that's one thing that you like to do on your Sabbath, and you take great Instagram videos of the process, which I love to see. So you want to just share like a little bit about your baking journey and what you've been baking recently and what you're really into?
Oh, would I? Yes, I would. Yeah, actually, it started like maybe a little bit over a year ago. Yeah, in the spring, actually probably like in the winter of last year, like maybe February, January, February. Well, before then, I started watching the Great British Baking Show, and I was super into it, and then I was just like, I love this, and I want to, like, start making stuff like this. Yeah. And so I gave myself, like, a fun goal to bake something new once a week.
Ooh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so then I was like, well, the Sabbath was, like, the only time I had to do that, but also it was also something, like, exciting to do. So I did that. I didn't do it every week. There were some weeks where I was like, I'm just too tired or whatever, but most of the time I did it, and I like experimented with so many different things. Some things I made and I spent 4 hours on, and it was like a dud. I was like, no, those are sad days, but that is just part of the baking process. Yes. Like, it really is. And I got I rented a book by Paul Hollywood about baking, and he said something in there like, what makes somebody a great baker is that they're willing to like retry recipes over and over again until they like
perfect them,
get it right.
I think that was just someone honking their horn.
Oh. It was a weird honk.
It was.
Horn or whatever. Yeah. So I don't know, I just was like, okay, so I'm not the only one who like messes things up and stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, and then I took like a break for a little while. I just like got busier, and then I baked like one thing of bread, and that was amazing. But I can't eat a lot of bread, because I guess I'm like slightly lactose intolerant, or not lactose. Gluten, yeah. Gluten intolerant. I am lactose intolerant. But, yeah, and so, but then I heard that sourdough is really good for your gut and is easier for your body to digest. So then my friend's mom does sourdough bread and stuff, so I asked her, and she gave me some.
Yay.
And so that has been a whole new journey for the last few months, because that's a living thing you have to keep alive and feed, and there are certain recipes where you can use it as a leavening agent, and then there's some where you don't have to. You can add like baking soda or baking powder and stuff.
Yeah.
So that is a whole nother thing, because I have to bake once a week.
Oh,
actually.
Right.
In order, like, if I don't want to waste the discard, like each time I feed it, I discard some of it, and then I feed it more so it doesn't just like overflow.
Okay, yeah.
So there are times when I'm like, wow, I didn't want to spend this much time baking, but I didn't want to like waste it. Sager's actually been talking to me recently about like, maybe sometimes it's better for you to just throw some of it out if you don't have energy. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So
yeah,
I'm learning that. But it has also like made me just experiment with a lot of new things. I'm actually trying to make sourdough bread. I'm trying to, like, whenever we're done with this, I'm gonna make the dough tonight, and then I'll bake it tomorrow for the first time.
Oh, okay. So you made like things.
I made all other kinds of things. I've made sourdough muffins, pretzel bites, coffee cake, donuts, bagels, crackers.
You're crazy.
Banana bread.
Wow.
There's a lot of things you can do with sourdough.
That's awesome.
A lot. So, and then I made pizza and garlic knots.
Yum.
Just this week.
Wow.
So anyways, I'm finally gonna try out sourdough bread. For some reason, that's like a bigger thing in my head. And I'm like, it's probably not that much harder than all the other things, but
might be easier.
Yeah, honestly. So yeah, that's a new journey.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Just like talking to you, that's another thing I've always appreciated about you, Jess, is like your passions. Like, you just like a lot of different things, and I think you go through seasons of like being super into stuff. So like, I mean, obviously like theater and stuff, and I know you'd still do that, but we've talked just about like, you're like, how can I not do everything? Like, I want to do everything, you know?
Yeah.
And, so like we could talk about plants and stuff, because I know in college you like took classes on that, and I always learned a lot about plants from you and stuff. So we'll just, if you want, I would love to do this again. Thank you so much for listening to the Grace for the Tryhard podcast. I hope you feel encouraged, empowered, challenged, and that you know that you are so loved by God. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, as well as rate and leave a review. Talk to you soon.